Hi, I'm Kim Klett, and I am here today with Alex Zapruder, and we are here to talk about a new project that she has going. Most of you probably know Alex from this book, Salvaged Pages, which many of us teachers have used over the years. But today we're here to talk about a new project that Alex has just started recently. And Alex, I wanted to ask you, what made you want to start this project? It's called Dispatches from the Quarantine. Why start this project and why now?
So first of all, thanks, Kim, for interviewing me. It's great to see you over Zoom. Um, I've been thinking for a long time, many years, about young writers' diaries and young writers in general. And first it was Salvaged Pages, which is very much focused, of course, on young Jewish victims of the Holocaust. And then more recently, in the last couple of years, I expanded that interest to young people writing in other wars and genocides, other historic events during the 20th century for an exhibition that I curated for Holocaust Museum Houston, which is called And Still I Write. Um, and so during the course of that sort of progression in my interests and my studies, I started thinking about today and sort of who are the corollary writers to these writers in the past? Who are the young people today who have something meaningful to say about their day-to-day lives? And I was particularly interested in vulnerable teens, young people who are living with tremendous hardship, because that is kind of the whole spirit of so much of the work that I've been studying. And then COVID-19 happened, and suddenly everyone the world over was living through a historic event and living through hard times. And so it seemed like the right moment to try to ask the question, specifically, what are young people experiencing today? And to think about how the diaries of the past can help us to inspire young people to think about their own lives and to observe and to record and document. And of course, I'm especially interested in teenagers and young adults and in the specific experiences that they have. I think that perspective on life is fleeting. And if we don't capture it in the moment, then it will be gone. And that would be a shame.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to go back to the fact that you've always been interested in the writings of young people. That's, where you got your start in your publishing world. So why is it important to keep these records?
Well, one of the things that was so surprising and interesting to me about Salvaged Pages, the work that went into Salvaged Pages, and then the work that went into the Diaries exhibition in Houston, is that young people do make a very meaningful contribution to the historical record when they write, when they make art, when they take photographs, when they sort of offer their perspective on what is happening in the world. And I think that we all too often tend to disregard teenagers and young people and sort of think that, they're just passing through this developmental stage on their way to being adults, and that when they're adults, they'll have something to say that maybe we should listen to. And what I learned from Salvaged Pages is that it's precisely because they're young and precisely because they have a very particular view of the world that we are able to glean different kinds of insights, different kinds of observations about not only about what I might call youth culture, that is school and friendships and conflict with or relationships with family, identity, coming of age, the kinds of aspects of life that are paramount to young people, but also aspects of life that are paramount to all of us. The passage of time, for example, how we understand time, the experience of hope, what it means to lose someone you love, how to grieve something that you've lost, how you observe the way that a street looks, in the middle of the night. Anything that might interest an adult is also something that a young person can speak to. And it turns out that those observations are deeply poignant and interesting and provocative, and oftentimes offer something fresh that we wouldn't get any other way.
Absolutely. And so how is the recording of this pandemic related to or maybe different from record keeping of previous world events?
Well, it's so interesting because the whole idea of this project was to, of course, solicit the writing of teens in the present, but also to think about how what they write can sort of be put in conversation with the records of the past. So to take a theme or a topic that young people wrote about in the past and think about how young people might write about it in the present. And so that's certainly a huge, a huge element of this. But one of the ways that it's so different and fascinating is that we're all recording our lives all the time now. You know, the Holocaust diaries that I collected were all written in notebooks. They were all handwritten in notebooks. And then the diaries that I was looking at for And Still I Write were the later, some were written in diaries and notebooks, and then the more recent ones were written as blogs, or one was written on a cell phone and transmitted to a BBC reporter. Some were written, others were written on technology, of course, on computers and that sort of thing. And if you then fast forward to 2020 and you think about the explosion of social media and texting and the dependence that we have on technology, selfies and photographs and Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc., Snapchat, young people and adults are leaving sort of material records of their lives day in and day out, all the time. And so the idea that we could zero in a little bit and say, let's be mindful about what we're recording. Let's sort of cut a slice through this noise of constant record keeping that we're doing even inadvertently, and intentionally observe in a certain way, intentionally ask ourselves certain kinds of questions in order to generate information and observations that might be meaningful both in the present and to the future. That was the challenge of this project. But the biggest way in which it's different is that every time I send a text message to somebody and I toss off some kind of, observation or some type of thought about what I'm living through right now, I've left a little record. So we're really doing it all the time.
And that's both really interesting and sometimes terrifying, right?
Absolutely. And it's fascinating. One of the things I wanted to mention is that I was so interested in this. I just started reading The Splendid and the Vile by Erik Larson, which is, I highly recommend. It's wonderful. And it's about, of course, Britain, about England, London during the Blitz in particular, and Churchill. And there was a project, I don't know if you've read it yet, Kim, but there was a project called Mass Observation that was an effort on the part of the British government to solicit diaries by regular citizens. And here they were, these people who, were living through the Blitz and writing these diaries day in and day out. And those records are a huge part of what Larson relies upon for his work. So, this kind of idea that you could do this not only individually because you're someone who happens to be interested in a diary, but also that a government like the Dutch government, there was recently a big article about diaries that have surfaced from World War II, or the British government, that there would be a call for this kind of record keeping is sort of interesting to me, because that's really what I'm doing on a smaller scale.
Exactly. And so on that note, there are many documentation projects that are already around COVID-19. So why does it make sense to use diary entries to create prompts, and what's kind of your thinking behind this?
Right. Well, so this is so important because there are so many projects out there. And I think it's great. The more, the better. It's very much a product of our time. We're quite self-conscious, I think, about how we're living through things and aware of the power of record keeping. I wanted to do something a little different. I didn't want to issue sort of generic prompts to teenagers and just say, document where you're living, or record your day, or what do you miss. All those are legitimate and valuable questions. But what I wanted to do was draw on this knowledge that I've gained over the last 20 or 25 years of writings of teenagers and young people, and think about what kinds of questions did they ask themselves? What kinds of things did they observe and reflect upon in their lives? And how can those help us generate the right questions to ask teenagers right now and young people right now about their lives? So to make that link between a historic diary entry and the questions that we're asking in the moment. So each prompt begins with a diary entry. In some cases, I might be able to include a work of art, a drawing or a painting, or some other object that was created by a young person. And to think about, what does that little entry contribute? What insight or what nuance does it offer us, whether it's historical or literary or in any other way? And then to extract from that a set of prompts that asks young people to make the same kinds of observations in the present about their own lives. And that's what I meant when I said, I want to put young people in conversation with one another, so that you might at some point think, well, let's look at the theme of hope, for example, and pull some diary entries from Holocaust young writers who wrote during the Holocaust, some from World War II who were civilians, some from somebody from Bosnia or from Iraq, somebody in Japanese American internment camp, and some kids who are writing in the present today, and think, well, how does that theme, how does that question that is so fundamental to the human experience get expressed by young people across time in circumstances of crisis? So that's really what distinguishes it, is this reliance on the historical material to shape the questions that we're asking today.
Yeah. So are there certain groups of young people that you're trying to engage in this project?
So I think it's really important to engage as many young people as we can from as wide a possible set of backgrounds as possible. And this is of course the great power of social media, that hopefully using social media we'll be able to reach kids who are in all different kinds of circumstances, living in urban or rural environments, children who are living fairly comfortably, to children who are living in circumstances of hardship or poverty, all different kinds of kids, because part of the goal here is each of us knows how we're living through this, but how else would you know what particular kinds of pressures or challenges face somebody who's so different from you? That's one of the amazing things about the diaries that I've read over the years, is that they're full of surprises, that you don't know. We're sort of so fundamentally on the deepest human level limited. Even no matter how much we wish that we could understand other people, we're so limited by our own perspective. And so if you're able to see the work, the writing, the experience of someone who's living in another country or in another circumstance, or who has challenges or hardships that are nothing like yours, then you really deepen not only your own humanity and your empathy, but also your understanding of the historical event in question. And so that's really, really important to me.
Yeah, I agree. It is quite an eye-opener, and I hope that you get all kinds of entries from all those different groups that you mentioned.
So we're definitely reaching out to people and encouraging people. And I just, will say, if anybody sees this, we want to hear from as many young people as possible. That means, if there are kids who are, recent, for example, asylum seekers, or young people who are in juvenile detention, or kids who are living in rural environments, kids who are, living on reservations. I mean, anybody who can offer a perspective that is interesting and insightful, that's what we want to hear. And one of the things that we're doing with the site as soon as possible is having it translated into Spanish, so that we can be sure that we capture a wide group of contributors, and that we're making it accessible to as many people as we can.
Great. And so you've partnered with the Educators Institute for Human Rights, and why are we a good fit?
Well, I mean, there's so many reasons. Of course, EIHR reaches out to teachers and works with teachers in, largely in post-conflict societies, to teach Holocaust education and human rights and genocide education. So many of the diaries that I'm working with and that I've studied over the years really reflect these exact experiences. So there's a kind of content overlap there. But also, I've just found that the teachers at EIHR and the staff at EIHR are people who share the kinds of passion and commitment that I have also for educators and for students, and a real fundamental belief in the value of young voices, that, this is not just lip service. We really believe that young people have something to say, and we want to hear it. And so that's, I think, a way in which our interests and our passions align. And also, it's very valuable for me to work with teachers who are in classrooms and on the ground and working with kids. It's not what I do. And so to be able to think about, how to adapt this material in a way, and this sort of idea in a way that will really be useful to teachers day to day, I think is just is really extraordinary and to the benefit of the project.
Thank you. And so what do you hope that young people get out of participating in this project?
Well, I think there are a couple of different levels. One level is, what do you as a young writer, what does it feel like to contribute to something like this? Does it give you some sense of purpose? Does it give you something interesting to do? Does it make you view your own role in the world a little bit differently, because you can sort of see your own agency and your own power, that you have something to say that people care about, that matters to the historical record? So I think on the individual level, for the young writers and artists and photographers and maybe musicians, or anybody who's contributing in any way, because of course my emphasis is always on writing, because that's what the historical material largely is made up of. But it's really important to the project that people know that they can contribute in any creative way that they want. And then secondarily, I want young people to realize that they are contributing to the historical record, and think about the fact that, I'll just stop to say, one of the most sort of eye-opening things that happened for me when I was working on Salvaged Pages was that the survivors who were letting me use their diaries so often thought and felt that their own records were superficial or unimportant. They always would say to me, what I wrote isn't like Anne Frank. My diary is not important like her diary. My diary is I just wrote about boys, or my diary is just about boring things like school and friendships. But it was when they were put together as a whole, and we could start to unpack the way that even things that seem trivial can in fact be very insightful and very meaningful, that those individual contributions became something more than themselves. And I think that's very much what I hope that teachers and young people will draw from this, that you may contribute once, you may contribute a photograph of yourself and that's it, or you may do, as I hope many young writers and young artists and others will do, which is to make it a practice and contribute to each prompt over a longer period of time. But what we don't know until we begin to go through the work is, how does each individual piece fit in the whole? How does it represent the life of its writer, or offer some new thought that is provocative and interesting? And how does it fit within a larger set of records that begins to really deepen the way that we understand the ongoing ramifications of something that we're living through in real time? We just don't know what those are yet. And I have to say, having just started to read through the contributions that we got in the last few days, I'm seeing so much that is so interesting, and it's really sort of validating the idea that this is something worthwhile to do.
So you just launched it this week, and I know that you're really happy that you're getting a lot of feedback and entries. Is there anything interesting? You just mentioned you're happy with what you're seeing. Anything you want to mention about those?
Yeah, one thing that has been so interesting to me is where the diary entries are coming from. Some of them I see are coming from students of teachers that I know, but a great many are coming from teachers that I don't know. And then we got a contribution from a girl in Beirut. We got another amazing one from a young person in Japan who sent this sort of, I don't even know what to call it. It was like a not interactive, it was online, and it was almost like a little movie kind of, but it was all different aspects of her life. It was something that you kind of watch online and flip through, and it was really like funny, and wonderful part of it was writing, and there was some photography in there and sort of a multimedia thing. We got some incredible poems from one particular young writer, some great artwork. So really a mix of things. And I think kids, it's fascinating to me because they seem to very intuitively get what it is that we're asking for. Some people are responding directly to the prompt. Some people are saying, this is just something I made or I did already that I wanted to share. So it doesn't have to be, it can still be contributed to the archive, even if it's not a direct response to one of the prompts. That those are meant to help, but not to limit the contributions. So I think what we're seeing is great. And, so far I feel great about it. I hope it's going to grow. Certainly that's my hope, that we'll continue to get more and more responses. And I hope we'll have repeat responses. I'm really hopeful that not only for the benefit of the archive, but for the benefit of the writer, that for some people this may instill in them, just like I mentioned, the mass observation project will sort of give them a reason to start writing on an ongoing basis and to develop that skill within themselves, or in the case of artwork or photography, to sort of observe and produce something on a regular basis, because I think there is a real value in that, not only in terms of what they're contributing to our particular project, but also in life.
And I think that's that shows, with what you've gotten so far, that people do need that creative outlet, that they do need to express themselves. And I think our young people definitely get that idea of seeing outside the box from what we might normally think.
Yeah. And I think even one last thing I would say is that I think, I think sometimes as adults, and I can say this sort of as a mother of teenagers, or a teenage daughter and a not quite yet teenage son, that, we tend sometimes to sort of not only dismiss, but sort of misunderstand their culture. It's easy to eye roll over Snapchat and TikTok. But I think the message that we care about what they're experiencing, that we care about how they tell us what they're experiencing, that those sorts of contributions, or to not only to the record, but to our adult understanding of their lives, that those things matter. I think that's a message that they need to hear. I really do. And I try in my own life as a mother, to check myself when I'm sort of rolling my eyes over what they're doing, because it is the life that they're living. And it is not our life. It's alien to us. It's very different from the way that we grew up, but it has its virtues and it has its strengths. And I think if we're able to help them understand that and harness that power, then I think we might be able to learn something that we wouldn't be able to learn any other way.
I think that's a great point. Alex, I just want to thank you again for doing this project. We're really excited about it at EIHR, and I know a lot of teachers are excited about it as well. So thank you, and we wish you success with it, and we really hope this leaves a mark.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Kim. It's great seeing you.
You too. Thank
Thanks.
you.